partnership with CUBO and University Living. And some of the highlights of the survey, which we'll tell you now in case you haven't had a chance to read.
So 50% of international students want to live with 3 or 4 others. So that goes against which many in the sector kind of say about the attraction of studios for international students. 21% of international students would want a shared bathroom. Notably, African students are particularly opposed to sharing bathrooms, with less than 10% considering it, while Indian students are past the average, with 31% willing to share their bathrooms. So I think it's just bringing out those different nuances of international students, and there's different cohorts of needs and requirements of those different students. 61% of parents, guardians paying for university accommodation, and just 12% are using a maintenance or government loan. International students show a strong inclination towards stability, with 22% favouring a 12-month lease. This desire for a longer contract is emphasised by the findings that nearly a third, which is 32%, of international students from Asia prefer accommodation contracts for the full length of the degree. This contrasts with the 19% figure among European students, highlighting again the regional variations in accommodation preferences. And one of the things I'm sure we'll come on to is that full-year degree lease, which we haven't seen in the marketplace anywhere yet, and actually there is a requirement or want from some cohorts for that. 77% of international students want all utility bills included in their rent payments, even if this results in paying a higher overall rent. And 57% would like a washing machine in their apartment, and it's something that we come across time and time again about the frustrations of laundry and the benefits of being able to wash in your apartment as you would in a home, which again is not something we often see.
So we have kindly been invited by Sarah before to host a roundtable, and any of you that came to that know that we don't use this time to present to you. We would much rather use the time to speak to you and get your knowledge and insight in a true roundtable kind of format. So we have got some discussion points that we'd love your views on. So please unmute yourselves and talk to us and talk to each other, and chip in, question, challenge each other, because we think that's kind of how the sector can move on, is by having conversations like this rather than just being presented at. Although we'd love you to read and digest our research separate to this call. So the first thing that we wanted to ask your views on is about shared bedrooms and shared bathrooms. From our research, we can see a lot of demand for students, particularly that are looking for more affordable accommodation. It's something that the PBSA sector has been reluctant / very slow / non-existent to provide. But obviously we know that university accommodation has much more breadth of accommodation generally. So yeah, what are your views and experiences of students in shared rooms and shared bathrooms? Karen?
Hi, yeah, I'm Karen Thomas. I work for the University of South Wales, so I head up accommodation, catering, and a number of other things. Previous to that, I worked in Reading University, managing 5,000 beds there. And the experience I've had with students sharing bedrooms is not a good one. It tends to be that students think it's a great idea, that it would save some rent, that there'd be that companionship, and it's great until it isn't. And then you end up with having to move one or other student if there are disputes, if there are differences in the way that they live. That's kind of one side of things. However, I have seen it work really, really well with close friends, companions that really want to live together and would struggle to do that. So, neurodivergent students that really kind of need that additional support. So I think it can work in the right situation, and I think it can work in the right location. So Reading University had lots of old houses with very big bedrooms that kind of allowed for space for 2 people to be in it. Traditional standard sized student rooms, I think, are really challenging to do that with. And I think, having said that as well, the demographic of sort of Nigerian students, Indian students, Pakistani students are still looking for that really cheap option, and may find that actually that is something that could be explored in some institutions. So very mixed bag in terms of experiences with it. But I think because of growing rental costs, because of shifts in demographics, it may be something that universities, you know, genuinely need to explore a little bit more.
That's great, thank you, Karen. Vicky?
Afternoon, everyone. I'm Vicky, University of Manchester. We're just at the early stages of developing a large part of our Fallowfield campus. It's going to be 3,300 new bedrooms. So we've got a lot of demolition. So if there's a lot of noise in the background, I apologise. We consulted with the exec officers from our student union, and they gave us a really clear steer that it'd be good to have smaller bedrooms, share bathrooms for a lower cost differential. At open days, most students that come and speak to us, they don't want to share bedrooms, they don't want to share bathrooms. When the parents see that that kind of accommodation is cheaper, the parents are then quite keen that they share a bathroom. But from the students, they generally don't want to. But interestingly, with our new accommodation, and construction costs are high in Manchester at the moment, but what we've found, and we're talking to 3 bidders at the moment, we've not closed dialogue yet. It's really difficult to drive the kind of price differential that you need by having shared bathrooms. So we're actually not going to do that. We're going to go ahead with all en suites for the new build, because the reduction in cost is minimal, and it's not a big enough differential to justify having the shared bathrooms. So I think there was a document from Martin Blakey recently around affordability, and some of the things he was suggesting were, you know, much bigger flats, so maybe 12, 13, 14, 15. We find once you go over 10 bedrooms to a flat, you tend to get party city. So, you know, my senior management team are like, no, we're not doing that. But they also mentioned, you know, shared bedrooms, shared bathrooms, but actually the response from the students is that it's not what they want. And if you're looking at new build, it doesn't really give you the cost differential that you need to justify it.
And just on that, Vicky, do you think that we've seen enough, I guess, design options around what those shared bathrooms shared? Like, I always worry that because a lot of that stock is older stock, that students are saying no because they've got a vision of something that may not be what actually we could build in the future, and that actually it's not the sharing that they per se are worried about, it's the type of product that's available to share.
Possibly. One of the bidders that we're working with have suggested townhouses, so maybe 120, 140 residents in townhouses, and there they look at a kind of Jack and Jill bathroom. So I think we're probably quite early on in that design in terms of going back to looking at what can work. We kind of threw it into the mix probably a little bit late, because we've been discussing this kind of 18 months now, and the feedback we got from the bidders is that it wasn't going to give us the cost savings that we were looking for. But I think moving forward, it's something that the developers are going to need to look at, because if you can find a way, you know, and we know with students they're coming to us at 16, 17, 18 on open days, so they might have a really, or think they've got a clear picture of what they want, but once they've been here and see how other students live, you can change their mind. So I think it's something that probably may develop, but for us, we've not been able to get the result that we were looking for.
Karen?
Yeah, the townhouse model does work really well. Reading had a number which were 4 rooms with 2 bathrooms, so shared but only just, and that seemed to work really, really well, particularly for returning students that wanted to live in maybe 2nd or 3rd year. So they almost had the benefit of the sort of halls contract lengths, the inclusive bills. It felt a little bit like a house. They felt like they were moving on to a different style, but again, the build cost trying to do that, you know, 4 or 5 years ago even, was just prohibitive. You know, so the standard format of cluster flats is what yields the biggest rent per the footprint. So trying to get builders to deviate from that is actually quite difficult. And the shared building, the smaller bedrooms with a shared bathroom, doesn't bring the rent down to a significant level to make it affordable. I can't ever see the sort of American style 4-to-a-room dorm style accommodation ever really taking off in this country, which is probably the only way that you would ever really genuinely drive down rent if it was formatted in that way. But I think a lot of students, particularly home market students, come from houses that have en suites, and they're very used to a particular way of living. And I think it's difficult. That the Dutch market, or the Dutch markets, did seem to be kind of leading the way in innovation, in trying sort of studios and trying various other bits and pieces that kind of enabled a different way of living. I'm not sure any of them have particularly stuck. So it's breaking that mold and innovating, I guess, in a way that enables the construction trade to yield some benefits as well, which I'm not quite sure we're there on that yet.
Thank you. Does anyone else have anything they'd like to contribute around shared bedrooms or shared bathrooms? Any good or bad experiences or predictions for the future? Fiona?
Yeah, thanks. I work with Vicky, I should just say, but I think one of the other things, we're very lucky to have a large estate, and we have a lot of retained estate. So where we have had communal bathrooms and sort of standard living as opposed to ensuite living, we have refurbished some of those buildings to quite high standard and increased the ratios. So actually it's more sometimes around the communication, because we've got literally facilities that are 1 to 2, 1 to 3. So it's almost as good as having an ensuite bathroom. We've been fortunate to be able to do that, and those halls also, some of them have got quite decent bedroom footprints as well, which is good. So I think we're trying to still maintain a variety of types of accommodation and price points. We don't get a lot of pushback once students have arrived around sharing the facilities. My colleague Paul Burns, who's on the call, he deals with the allocation side, so he can tell you more about the bum fight that goes on beforehand. But certainly in terms of when people are here, I think when they realise how people use the facilities and that you're not literally in an orderly queue waiting for them and things like that, people tend to forgive, and maybe sometimes it's balancing which options they want that fit their price point. Thank you.
That's really, really helpful, Fiona. And I just have one question on that is, do you feel that there's enough information for people when they're making that decision, in that actually having those shared kind of amenities isn't as scary as maybe that those that have experienced it, the expectations versus the reality of it, and actually wasn't as bad as they thought? Do we share that enough, and do we market that enough?
We certainly try and at open days have those kinds of conversations with prospective students, because we've got different campus areas and different types of accommodation, catered accommodation, self-catered, standard ensuite. So we try to give people the broadest view that we can. I think students themselves, peer-to-peer stuff's always good, because they tend to like listening to things like that. I don't know how else other than that, and kind of maintaining the information on the website and making as much stuff as available as we can. But I think people do, I think different students come with their own perceptions of what it should be like and what they think it's going to be. They might never have had an ensuite in their life, but all of a sudden they're urgent to, it's absolutely critical that they have one. But they've been used to sharing a family bathroom with the family of 10 for about 15 years, or 18 years. So I think it's trying to manage the perceptions, I think.
We often wonder, going back to the statistic we shared earlier, 50% of international students want to live with 3 to 4 others, and we've done the same research with domestic students as well, and 4 does seem to be the magic number. So we wonder again, when you're thinking about sharing bathrooms, sharing with 4 people feels like a family group. Like you said, you're not likely to be, queuing for the bathroom, etc. But sharing in flats of 10 is obviously, not going to be ideal. So, the smaller flats could potentially, solve other problems as well. We've just got some information, some chat in the chat box.
Yeah, so I think I can't see who that was asking about. You're in South Africa, you're keen to understand more details of the sample used to extract these. So we have got that information, so we can probably send that on to you. So that was Gary. And Hannah, I think you're saying similarly that you asked the question, and the overwhelming answer was no. And that is, we hear that a lot and we see that a lot, but yet in our data we are getting some willingness to share. But I think this comes down to product and whether there is an innovative way to get it in a way that people are comfortable. And I think what Karen said around, if it's people who already know each other, already friends, and they're the right people to be living together, that's going to be a much better experience than just putting 2 random people together and hope that they get on. So I think there's lots of nuances around, if you did go down the sharing product route, it's about getting an innovative design that gives a sense of privacy whilst also delivering those benefits. I think, there's a valid argument around construction costs and enabling that to actually be a price differentiator. And I think there's also an operational focus around how you put those groups of people together so that actually that experience is a positive one, not a negative one. I think, Paul, you had your hand up, but I'm not sure if you still do.
I did, and
Okay.
I'll put it down. Yeah, at the risk of this becoming a Manchester fest, I work with Vicky and Fiona, so apologies to everyone else who thinks we're dominating this. But just a couple of points. Just to reiterate Fiona's point, yes, I think if you ask people before they arrive, do they want to share? The answer is going to be no. But when they get here, and I know from experience, both pre-arrival and post-arrival, dealing with complaints, doing surveys, where we interview an awful lot, not interviews, or we question an awful lot of people, the anxiety levels pre-arrival drop massively post-arrival, to the extent that, and I don't wish this to come across as flippant, I don't worry about it hugely, because I know that what presents pre-arrival will not be there when people have settled in and made friends. And similarly, if you ask people what their ideal group might be, I can understand why a lot of people could imagine 4 being a good group, because their previous experience may well be a positive one. But when you put one person with 3 others from perhaps widely different cultural backgrounds, different disciplines, all of the same age, having with different lifestyles, 4 may not be very good for the 1 or 2 people who don't fit in. So just because I think we've got to be wary of sort of the tail wagging the dog. Not saying that you're saying this, just for the record, but the fact that people say at the age of 16 or 17 what they want doesn't mean they know what they want or what would be good for them. And I think perhaps all the people on this call and our colleagues elsewhere in the sector, from years of experience, actually do know that very often 6 to 8 people can be a better group, a better size rather, for that group to peacefully coexist. I can think of far too many instances where one person in a group of 4 becomes isolated because of problems in the flat. So I'm not keen on following necessarily what people say they want. And similarly, final point before I'll shut up then, is I think we need to be careful sometimes of looking at particular demographic groups and saying, well, this is what they say they want. And we could pick various national cohorts and being led by thinking, well, this is what the market wants, when that market may not be there in years to come due to currency fluctuations, economies crashing. When I started in this business years and years ago, we had for a good number of years a phenomenal number of Greek students in Manchester in residences. If I was designing a apologies to anyone who's from Greece here right now, but I would design a huge smoking hall of residence, because they just, everyone was out at night having a fantastic time. But that's gone, that market's gone here. We wouldn't have designed our social facilities around, and we didn't, around that particular demographic. So I think we have to be careful. Yes, take on board what people are saying, but also recognizing that very often these are just sort of passing ships. And with that point, I will shut up.
No, I totally agree with you, Paul. And I mean, very much we present what customers say to the sector, and it's very much, this is why we have these discussions really, because it's through understanding that data, and then you've got to be pragmatic, you've got to be commercial about how you build it and what you build. So it's just about saying, well, here's some data to help mold that, but yeah, it's never going to be the answer, because the answer comes from all those different things that go into building a building. Amy.
Hello, Amy Pointer from the University of Salford. So just to jump in on the Manchester Fest, but from the other side, we don't actually have any shared accommodation, shared rooms at Salford, but prior to my role here, I worked at the University of Bristol, where about 10% of our stock was shared rooms. The majority of those were twin rooms in the ageing university owned stock, but we did have some 2DOs as well in some of our modern PBSAs. And I think the key that we found, because we did have fairly high dissatisfaction, you know, higher volumes of students requesting transfers out of those rooms during the academic year, but the way that we kind of cracked it was to really develop a very sophisticated allocation system. So at Bristol, students are invited to select 9 accommodation preferences, and we've actually got possible 90 combinations. So we used star rares, and basically students pick a residence and a room type, and they have to list 9 preferences, and then we use that data to allocate them rooms. And we identified shared rooms as a priority during that allocation process. So rather than kind of fill rooms equally, we would make sure that anyone who'd picked a shared option, preferably in their top preferences, got a shared room, so that the students living in those rooms weren't the ones who didn't want to, who didn't indicate any kind of preference. And that resulted in higher satisfaction and fewer requests to move out of those rooms during the year. I think it can get additionally complicated as well when, certainly at Bristol, we had a few years of sort of crises related to undersupply, and twin rooms was one way of mitigating against that risk of not meeting the guarantee. And so unfortunately for some students, particularly insurance applicants, some of those were put into shared rooms as a way to manage that demand, and they absolutely did not want those rooms. They were expecting to live in a standard single occupancy room. So that kind of skews the experience a little bit, I think, because by design that's not a great experience. So obviously avoiding that where possible, but I think, yeah, the key is where there's an allocation system in place to kind of do it in a way that we can make sure that people who are actually up for sharing are the ones who end up in those rooms.
That's great, thank you.
Really interesting. The next thing is about what came out really strongly in our survey is a desire from students to have access 24/7 to a washing machine in their flat, included in their rent. We delved into this a little bit deeper. Some of it is driven by cost, and for most paid for laundry services, 1 wash and 1 dry a week can equate to around £300 a year. So there's definitely a cost relation to it. The other one is hygiene. A lot of international students don't like the idea of sharing washing machines with other people. And then the other one is people that have had experience of badly managed laundry operations in previous living spaces. So yeah, what are your views? You know, we often talk about all-inclusive rent, but it rarely includes laundry. And clearly that is you know, a big factor at the moment. Hannah.
Hi, I'm Hannah from the University of Southampton. So for the very first time this year, we have included laundry costs in the rental fees, simply because we were getting quite poor feedback at the end of the year on the laundry system. Doing some pulse surveys, it has definitely gone up, but now they don't have to pay at point of use. The demand has gone up, so we're now getting, there aren't enough machines. We're then having problems with people taking each other's laundry out of the machines and kind of dumping it on the floor or elsewhere because they want to use the machine. So it's definitely worked for kind of satisfaction scores and people enjoying the fact that they don't have to pay. However, it's then presenting a lot more challenges as well. We've done quite a lot of work on the laundries, and yeah, the cleanliness of the machines does also come up. Hair in the machines after the last person's used it. So it's definitely things that students are still not pleased about. Obviously, we have our cleaning teams going in. We have twice a week maintenance of the machines by the company we use. So we do quite a lot. But I don't think there's any way that you're ever going to combat that. I mean, even if it's a machine in a shared kitchen within their accommodation, unless the person that uses it before doesn't clean it, you're probably still going to get the hair in the machine. So, yeah.
And just out of interest on that, Hannah, is there a restriction on the limit to which they can wash and dry in a year, or they can have as many as they want? It's unlimited?
No, completely unlimited. They literally just go in, push a button, start the machines. There's no way we track it. We've also auto-dose down machines as well. So there's a couple of machines that don't have detergent in case people want to use specific ones or have allergies, but all of the rest of them have detergent in as well to help with cost of living and the amount of waste from washing products that get used.
And do you think the challenges are manageable enough that you'll continue to do that, or is that still out for review?
I can't see us changing it anytime soon. I think we're going to have to look more at kind of messaging and working with the students so they understand kind of fair use. And yes, it's annoying when the machines aren't always available. So how much are you using it? How many machines are you using at the same time? We had somebody the other day who said, oh, washing's gone missing from the machine. And she said she had 5 on the go at once. And we're like, well, if you're using 5 washing machines at once, I'm sure people are getting a little bit annoyed and taking the washing out, and she found her stuff, so it was fine. But yeah, I think it's more work with the students. So we're getting our Res Life ambassadors and some standard student helpers in the laundries a fair amount, trying to promote sustainable use. We've also done cold washing trials as well to see if they really notice the difference, doing blind washing tests, and generally no one notices if it's a cold wash or a hot wash. So we're looking at potentially doing a trial for a month with cold wash only.
That's good.
And I guess, Hannah, your risk of doing it on campus kind of widespread is if you, and especially if you've got a proportion of returners on campus, is if at any point you decide to take it away and start charging again, then it will be seen as an increase in costs. So I guess it's a really, really, must have not been taken lightly when you made that decision to make it free.
Yeah, wasn't a decision that I made, but it was done completely in collaboration with our student union. They were the one that was driving a lot of the feedback from the students on the washing. One thing we are seeing though is students who have friends in PBSA or private accommodation now love inviting them along to come and use our free laundry facilities too. So it's managing who's getting access in there as well.
Yeah.
And Karen has just asked about knowing, do you know yet if it's impacted your utility bills? Is it actually costing the university much more?
I don't have those figures at the minute, but I'm sure it is something that we'll definitely be keeping an eye on. Another reason why we are also trying to encourage the cold washing, so we're not using as much electric to heat up the water and things like that. So it is kind of automatically set to, I think it's 30, but we're trying to see if they notice it at cold, so not heated at all.
Good. Fiona?
Laundry is a perennial conversation at the University of Manchester with the students. Not always negatively, although everybody would always like a machine whenever they want it. I think there are a lot of developments in the laundrette field. So we use Circuit. They've got about 8 different things that they're looking at in terms of remote management, self-heating, water recycling systems, automatic soap dispensing, lots of things that are going to try to minimise carbon impact. I think for institutions, putting a machine into every single flat may be a preferable opportunity, you know, and students would love it. However, there are costs about mending machines and all the operational costs that come with that, and that would just feed back into the rents. So sometimes you're better off leaving the professionals to what they're good at. Our breakdown data is really low for the number of machines we have and the actual responsiveness we generally get from the company. And if we need to ever give them a kick up the backside, we do. But I just think sometimes it's where would we stop with the home comforts? And again, we're trying to address the sustainability agenda. I do know that some of the larger PBSA developments in Manchester have very high numbers of international students in them and have implemented some of the ideas that I've just mentioned. Some to more success, greater success, I think, than others. But I've never had somebody saying they're worried about the cleanliness of our machines, and we do have a regime for cleaning them. I think it's just people would always like something free.
Out of interest, have any of you included laundry as like a package, as something that students can add on at the point of, you know, being allocated a room or anything like that?
We haven't, but I know that some. I know, for example, I think don't know if there's anyone on the call from Leeds, but I think Leeds have had it as free vend or something similar to what Southampton just said, as to what they've done in a view to make it appear more attractive and cost of living. And I think that's more offset against what commission they'd normally receive from the laundry. They've just basically written that off so that they can provide the service to the students.
Thank you. Helen?
So I'm at Newcastle, and we're looking at the moment about whether we include it in costs for next year, but not free vend, but we're looking at, is it sort of the equivalent of 2 washers, 2 dryers a week? But we've been quite lucky working with again, we work with Circuit, but what we've done is drive down the costs and make it that it's a bit of a subsidiary service that we do, so they only pay watch out everybody, because everyone's going to go, really, £1.20 a wash and £1.20 to dry at Newcastle, so it's £2.40, and we've done that for basically all of the reasons that were mentioned before. We didn't want to make it free because then we thought it'll become unmanageable with the washer dryers that we've got now, and also there is still a cost if anybody else from sort of external to us uses it, but we are mindful again with that cost of living. Very lucky our student union are very supportive of that, and we've just gone with them. So any commission that we make, it's a nominal amount now because of obviously the vend price that we have, goes back into our Res Life team as well. So they will siphon that back into student activities. So again, we can give more free things because of what we're doing. So yeah, we're looking at a few different aspects with it, but our main driver at the moment is just keep the cost down. So they're not looking at these £4, £5, £6 per wash, and I don't know whether that kind of keeps us on a more even keel, because we don't get any complaints about our washing and drying facilities.
It's a very, very reasonable price, I think. Paula?
Yeah, I love the subject of washing, I must admit. We don't include it in our offer, but we've had a really good experience working with Washco. If anyone's interested, I'm not as close as I'd like to be to the detail. I've just been trying to find my emails up, but we charge £2 a wash, which is fairly reasonable. But we've actually, the deal was that we would actually purchase the machines as well. And Washco are now on a maintenance contract for 5 years. And we're actually in quite a healthy profit position. And I'm sure a lot of colleagues around this virtual table, I think we're all under pressure now to for cost savings and certainly starting to increase income wherever we can. So this is working really well for us. The machines are good, they're very reliable, and we don't get any complaints from students. So yeah, I'm more than happy with that.
That's great. Thank you all. That was really, really useful. And we'll keep an eye on that because it sounds like there's quite a lot of innovation going on. And I particularly like the approach Helen has at Newcastle as well. I think most of the conversations that we're having with students and we're seeing in the survey is cost related. And we just wonder if it's, you know, potentially adding it in or adding it as a package rather than the students feeling like they're dishing out money every single week to do their washing is kind of what the, you know, the barrier is. So reducing that or including it or making it free entirely is, you know, definitely going to increase satisfaction.
Cool.
Oh, sorry.
So next topic we want to discuss is that we often ask about kind of what events or activities people are interested in, and what comes up time and time again is kind of the personal development adds real value. So just really interested to get your kind of viewpoints on what you're finding from your Res Life programs.
I guess personal development activities versus entertainment. And it seems like personal development such as CV writing, crafts, TED Talks, language, you know, that kind of thing is coming out a lot higher than social events, really. It seems like quite a lot of people are quite satisfied with getting their social life off campus elsewhere on their own, but they're looking for a bit of added value when they're in their accommodation. Any comments on that? No, that's fine. We will move on. And the other thing, we asked students whether they want to live with people from their own demographics or not. We know that this is a contentious issue, and wonder kind of what your views on creating demographic silos. You know, do students request that they live with other students from their own country, and do you accommodate that, or do you always mix the demographics up? Yeah, we're interested to hear your views and experiences on that. Karen?
Really contentious one, this one.
Yeah.
My previous institution, the Dean of Learning Services was absolutely adamant that Chinese students wanted the experience of living with other English students to improve their language, to soak up the culture, and that it was an important part of their journey. And when allocated into mixed culture groups, there was an instant we want to live with others of our own nationality. So there was a huge disconnect between university aspirations and what they thought was okay to the reality, and where it was impossible to put those students all together. There were challenges with different eating types, different food, different styles of cooking, different ways of keeping food in fridges, not in fridges. So some real challenges in that. I think some cultures mesh really, really well together, but I think there are others that really find that very challenging when they come to this country. So but again, most universities will advocate for, you know, as much mix of a culture in a flat as possible. I'm not entirely sure that always works.
Thank you, Karen. Does anyone else have any views on that? I guess it's that mix of customer satisfaction, resident satisfaction, or what they think that they'll be happy with versus a rounded experience, and mixing with other cultures. Yes, Paula?
Yeah, I think we would always do our best to try and satisfy any requests for students to be in a flat where it's predominantly their culture. But we wouldn't be looking at siloing them in terms of our sites, and in terms of having one site that was, you know, Chinese or, you know, whatever. At the moment, we've got an awful lot of Nigerian students. So I suppose by default, we do have a majority of Nigerian students at one site. But that's very much going to change next year, as the market's dropping out, as I'm sure everyone's experiencing. But yeah, we would try and satisfy those initial requests, but not look to have a predetermined block that was Nigerian or Chinese or something like that. Yeah.
And are you finding that outside of their flat communities, they are mixing with that wide network? Because that you know, that process seems a sensible approach, that actually in your flat community you've got those with the cultures, but actually in the building you've got a mix of cultures. But do you find that they are naturally mixing, or is your international kind of department aiding that or creating that? Or
I think it's difficult because over the last 2 years, as I say, it's been predominantly Nigerian students that have been very, and they're very active as well in terms of our student union. So there's been a big, you know, there's lots of activity from our Nigerian students, and I think our other demographics are having to just get along in the mix, so to speak. So I'm really interested to see how that's going to change for semester one. As I say, we know we're not going to have those same numbers, and we've got more Southeast Asia, Indian students, some more Chinese students. So I think that's going to be really interesting to witness how that culture and vibrancy changes at the different accommodation sites. Yeah. So I'll report back.
Yeah, it would be interesting. And are the students from particular demographics requesting that at the time that they're applying for accommodation? Or is it something that you're just doing because you come from experience?
No, I think the majority of our students will request that on application. Yeah.
Okay. That's great. Anyone else on demographic kind of communities?
Yep.
Paul?
It's not uncommon to have requests from home students to not be placed with international students, and that's not something I agree with.
No.
And similarly, I'm not convinced that. I think you can take a stance on this, and I do. I kind of believe in, whether other people do or not, in people, whether they like it or not, being exposed to other cultures, having challenges. I don't think life should necessarily be one where challenges are removed. So yeah, I think it can be difficult. It certainly taught me a lot when I went to university and came across people from backgrounds I'd never didn't know existed, you know. But that was something that helped make my university experience far more than the subject I studied. And so yeah, my view often, and I'll say this in talks I do at open days, if it's really, really important for people to live with people just like them, however people define themselves, and there's numerous ways to do it, then I think that's what the private sector's for and private housing's for. Go and live with people who, and none of that, when I say that, I don't think that people then living in a mixed community should hide whatever their particular traits are, should be proud of it. But I think it's what we're about. We're a university. And certainly in Manchester, in a fantastically diverse city and fantastically diverse region, and it's, for me, it's part of the deal.
I think that, and I one of my overwhelming memories of going to university myself. I mean, I didn't live in halls of residence, so it's nothing to do with the university, but I remember that I did develop a friendship probably in my second or third year with some international students, and I was amazed that I hadn't come across them until that point. And it was very much, and it was a memory that I always had. I said, well, why wasn't I encouraged to mix with those international students at that time? Because I think it is an important part of the experience, really, for domestic students. So yeah, it's a shame that you've got those requests from domestic students for that, really.
It's a minority, don't get me wrong, but
no, I know.
It's yeah.
Karen, did you want to add to that topic as well?
Yeah, I think I completely hear what Paul says, but I think there is a reticence for students and for parents to engage with those type of what they call sort of, what I mean, risky. Is little Johnny going to get upset? Are they going to not like something that is happening? Are they going to want to change? Are they going to be, crying on the phone to them because they're in a mixed flat? That resilience, I feel, has gone. And I think for a lot of universities, they are more focused on retaining students, not losing them, keeping them happy, making sure that they feel comfortable in their residences, making sure that they feel comfortable and able to deal with everyday life. And some of those things that would normally just add to the experience, the wider experience of being at university, tends to floor some students. And I think we spend a lot of time trying to protect that, rather than just, as Paul said, and I'd love to be at those talks to see the reaction of students and parents, but certainly I think if I stood up and said to some of the parents, look, I think you just need to soak it up, buttercup, and enjoy the experience of being in a diverse community, I'm not sure we'd get very far. But I love the idea of that, and I think it should be that. But I think, and I've said this, I think our marketing and our how we present things needs to be different. How we manage expectations, how we onboard students. I think we do an awful lot in universities around transitions to learning. We don't do enough around transitions to living differently away from home, living differently with other communities, living differently with other cultures, managing, our washing and our cooking and our, we just don't do enough about that. So we take students that are increasingly handheld throughout secondary school, and we put them in a university environment and expect that they are now able just to kind of manifest that. Now, back in the day, you just got on with it. I don't think we're there now. And I think universities have got to do much more around positively managing those expectations in the build up to bringing students into residences, whatever that might be.
Yeah, I love the thought of that, Karen. I'm kind of visualizing some great video content of students, cooking different ways and different food in the same flat, and building up tolerances to each other and being inquisitive and learning from each other, potentially. But like I said, it's about preparation, really. That if most people have just lived in their family home for 18 years, it's all going to be a massive culture shock. And then if you throw in somebody else's culture into that flat environment, then it's not surprising that it's difficult to adjust.
And I am talking about recent experiences of University of South Wales, which is a valleys-based university, tending to get students from Welsh valleys, and it's even more evident that there is that nervousness of mixing.
Paul?
Yeah, I just wanted to possibly reassure Karen that the reactions aren't always necessarily positive. but for me, the point is, and very often the really negative ones are said privately afterwards when I invite people to come to the stage and speak to me, because they don't want to say it in public. But and maybe I'm in a fortunate position in Manchester, given the demand and the supply issues we've got, to be able to speak my mind a bit more freely. But going back to something that was said earlier on, when I think maybe Sarah was asking Fiona about is it the information we give? And I really do think it's important that we do give accurate information. So in about 40 minutes, I'll be going to the aero engineering prospective students and speaking to them. And one comment I'll say, because it's highly scripted, will be, today they've come to university to be making sure Manchester's the right place to study. If it all hinges on the bricks and mortar that surround them, if that's what determines whether they come to Manchester, I actually think there's something wrong with the decision-making process about seeking an education, because you should be going to university because for whatever the things are you want out of a university, and different people want different things in terms of the academic result, and that's what should be guiding your decision. And if you don't get quite what you want to live in, well, that's not the best outcome. I don't drive the car that I'd really like to drive, but it works and it gets me to where I want to go. And I think there's an element of that in life where we need to be fairly straight with people as to what you want and what you get are two different things, aren't they? But maybe that's not so popular, so I don't know. I try and say it with a smile on my face. So.
Yeah. No, I think, you know, my kids, one of them's choosing universities at the moment, and I think, you know, as a family we'd appreciate, you know, that honesty, and appreciate someone else telling our children that as well as the parents. We haven't got much time left. We just wanted to cover really one more main topic, which is around contract lengths, and there was quite a strong demand for students to secure accommodation for the length of their degree. Is that something that any of you have explored or experimented with? You know, students, is it another one of the students are saying it, but in reality, would they do it?
It is something that I've sort of toyed with, not necessarily in this institution, but previously, because again, that was very much the demographic there really wanted to just turn up, pay for it up front, and just have their room for the next 3 years. I think there's always a nervousness around, do we have enough rooms for incoming first year students? And that tends to be a bit of a driver. So if you then fill up with your students that want sort of 3 years in the same room, returning students, you start to limit, I think, some of the other activities that you can do. So, you know, conferences, for example, in the summer. I personally think it would be easier. I think, you know, a 51-week contract with 1 week at the end where you kind of send students off, you clean the room, there's got to be a different way of doing that. If a student really wants to stay in that room for 3 years, why can't we facilitate it? So I think universities are very good at sort of just going along with what they've done before, and being a bit terrified to be the first ones to jump into something different. So it may well be that we do it, but it is something we thought about. Well, why don't we do this? Why can't we give those students that really want that, particularly international students, that comfort that they've got it for that length of time? So yeah, it's something that we've considered, but not gone, you know, full steam ahead on, but we may well do that. I'll let you know how it goes if we do.
No, that'd be great. Thank you.
We often think that if you released 10 rooms that are available, you know, it doesn't have to be lots and lots, but you won't know the demand unless you try it. And there may not be any demand. But if you've got some that are available, then at least you'd know. Has anyone else got anything that they'd like to add before we wrap up, particularly on contract lengths and longer contracts, or, you know, full year or full degree contracts for accommodation? No? Perfect. Well, thank you all for being so active and contributing so much in the chat and on screen as well. And we learned a lot from it, and it really helps add an extra dimension to our research, really, because we've asked the students and now we want to know what's practical and what's really going on campus. So thank you all, and hopefully you have enjoyed reading our research and engaging with it. And if there's anything else that you want to know, just let us know. I'm sure Sarah has shared our contact details as well. I think we did on our agenda as well. So yeah, thank you. Stay in touch.
Yeah,
Thank you very much to Sarah. Oh, sorry, carry on. Sorry.
As I say, we do run regular youth forums as well, where we're similar to kind of pulse surveys, where we do kind of test the market. So yeah, they're there on our website for people to digest and free to access. So yeah, and if you want any help with kind of understanding that market more, then do just give us a shout.
Great. Thank you so much to Sarah and Deanie for today's session. It will be available on the CUBO website later on today if anybody wants to go back and revisit any points of the conversation. But I will wrap up the call there. Thank you to everybody for joining us today, and hope you have a good afternoon.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks for that. That was really, really interesting.
Oh, good.
Yeah, no,
we
that was
found
good.
it.
It's great
Yeah,
to
no,
hear.
it's bits of feedback from different institutions, isn't it? I suppose everybody's got different experiences. So no, it's really, really good.
Also, we always say, like, with our research, we're not telling people how to do it. We're just telling you what the customers are saying. But it's really important to actually work out what is and isn't practical. And it sounded like a couple of those points, it made some people go, oh, actually, I don't know why we don't do that. Or
yeah.
So yeah, great, thank you.
Brilliant.
And everyone,
no, that's great. Thanks.
Great. So thank you.
Oh no, that's good.
Yeah.
It's always helpful when they're kind of engaging with you as well during the call, isn't it? So that always is always a bonus. So no, I'm glad it went well, and yeah, taken the full hour. So that's
just
always
that
good as
interest,
well.
Sarah, because obviously we don't take part in anyone else's roundtables. Is this how other people do their roundtables, or do most people present?
I've been using you as a bit of a sort of an example, because a lot of them, they all turn up and they've got slides, and it's kind of a bit of a PowerPoint presentation, whereas the two that you've done like this. So it's very much kind of, when we go back to say, it's not a one size fits all. Everybody does things differently, and this seems to work because people aren't hiding behind their screens because you're there. They've got to engage. I think it's really good, actually, and they're telling you information that's useful as well, that sort of colleagues can refer back to. So yeah, I mean, if you want to come to any of the other roundtable sessions, you're welcome to as partners. Those aren't closed, so yeah, you can sign up for any of those as they kind of come up. They normally get about 6 weeks beforehand that people start to ask us to book them in. So yeah, any ones that you think might be of interest, feel free to sign up for those. You're welcome to come along to them. But yeah, I'm always kind of on the lookout, different ways we can do things, but I think this one worked really well, the way that you do them.
I guess it's our understanding of a roundtable.
Yeah.
If it was called a presentation or a talk or something, then we might do it differently. But our version of a roundtable is although it's virtual, if we were sat around a table, we would be expecting interaction.
Absolutely. No, I think it works really, really well. So no, if you do any more, I think this format is working. So yeah, I think it's good. Use it as I say, use it as an example, but it's a positive example to use. Brilliant.
Cool. Thank you very much.
I'll once I've got the video uploaded onto YouTube, I'll share the link if you wanted to go back to it at any point as well. And yeah, thank you so much again. It's a really good session.
Okay. Thanks, Sarah. Speak to you soon.
Take care. See you. Bye.